Welcome to this episode of the Leading in Dentistry podcast. I'm Dr. Wes Eggett. After spending the last 20 years in a variety of leadership positions, and as a student of leadership myself, I started Leading in Dentistry to share what I found and to continue learning with you. If anything from this episode stands out, check out the show notes, our online courses, or one-on-one coaching on leadingindentistry.com. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Leading in Dentistry podcast. I'm Dr. Wes Eggett. For those of you new to the podcast, I am a practicing associate dentist just outside of Denver, Colorado, and I started Leading in Dentistry to help develop the leadership skills of each team member in a dental office, not just the business owner. And I say this in every episode, but I started this podcast specifically while I'm not an owner of any dental practice, because I really want to get across the message that you don't need to wait until you're in charge to be a leader. And a few months ago, I was having a conversation with a staff member that didn't quite go the way that I wanted, and it caused me to reflect. And I actually mentioned a little bit about this on the podcast, that I was going to do a deep dive into interpersonal communication and learn a little bit more about how things could have gone differently, and then report back on some of the things that I've learned. And this episode has been a long time coming because I read a couple of books and listened to a great number of podcasts, and there was just so much information that it was hard to boil down into the things that I believe matter most. So I hope that the couple of tips that I'm going to share today are as beneficial for you as they have been for me. These are the things that if I were to go back to myself right before that conversation, these are the things that I would have told myself. So this conversation happened on just any normal day, but it was a conversation that had been put off for a while. And in leadership, I think we do this quite often. We have a frustration, and we don't address it in the moment, and so things boil up, and people think that they're doing a great job, and then eventually you have a conversation that's for the person that you're having that conversation with, a little out of left field. And so when you start addressing things that have been needing to be addressed for quite a long time, then people start to get defensive, and then it turns into essentially an argument that you're trying to win, defend your position as why you wanted to correct some behavior. And so we start losing the point of the entire conversation is to improve behaviors, but instead we end up behaving badly. And so in this conversation, I thought the thing that I was addressing was very clear and obvious, and that it had been addressed before and discussed and alluded to, even if it wasn't as clear as it should have been. And so when I started to get some pushback from the person I was having the conversation with, I just didn't bring my best self to the conversation. And the things needed to be said, but I know that I could have said them in a better way, in a way that brought my best self to the table. So after that conversation and after all the study that I did, I wanted to share with you these 3 tips. Okay, so the first tip is to focus on labeling and sorting. Now, I know in life, generally we tell people not to label other people. That's not what this is. This isn't talking about labeling someone or calling them names. Labeling and sorting is a technique I learned from a podcast called The Look and Sound of Leadership, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But The Look and Sound of Leadership is a podcast specifically dedicated to interpersonal communication skills in leadership, and he gives a number of techniques, but this is the one that he comes back to in almost every single episode. Is called labeling and sorting. The idea behind labeling and sorting is that our brains aren't hardwired to just consume a lot of auditory information. Or if you're reading something, it's hard for your brain to put things into different folders. If you can imagine when you're talking with someone, setting them up so that they can receive information and organize it, that's going to help your receiver, the person that you're talking to make sense of what you're trying to talk to them about. So when I start this podcast and I tell you I'm going to be sharing with you 3 tips, your brain automatically creates these little folders. And if I were to say, okay, tip 1 is this, tip 2 is this, and then end the episode, then your brain would be wanting that 3rd tip. And so when you label and sort things, you are allowing the person to organize the information before you even give it to them. You're preparing their brain to receive the information that you're trying to convey. So it's called labeling and sorting because not only are you sorting things into, okay, 3 tips, but you're going to label those and say, okay, the first tip is this, the second tip is this. So if I'm going into this conversation with a staff member and I want it to go differently, And knowing about labeling and sorting, I would start that conversation by telling that team member, today I want to talk to you about two things. That's the sorting part. That helps their brain separate the conversation into different sections. Labeling, if you are giving a speech or something, you might want to label in the beginning. But if you're having a feedback conversation with a staff member, I would probably label the things, label the different topics that you're talking about as the conversation moves along. If you do the labeling in the beginning, you're going to throw everything at them that you want to talk about, and that's just going to catch them off guard. So if you say, I want to talk to you today about two different things. One, you've been late, and two, your production's low. I mean, that's going to immediately make them defensive. So if you say, I want to talk to you about two different things today, the first thing I want to talk to you about is I've noticed that we have a pattern of you consistently showing up past the time that we expect. Then you go through and address that part. Then after that is over, then you move on to the second part, or you have a dialogue first about that first point and then move on. The idea behind labeling and sorting is just to be able to give their brain some sort of spatial recognition of what you're looking for the conversation, that you want to help them organize it so that they can receive it better. So focusing on labeling and sorting is that first tip. Just a quick interruption for the new graduates out there. Every summer, the dental corner of the internet lights up with the same question. What's the most important skill a new grad should focus on? Is it implants, molar endo, surgical extractions? And year after year, the answer from experienced dentists is the same. It's leadership and communication. These are the skills that elevate every part of your career, no matter what your role is in the dental office. That's why we're offering special pricing on the Leading in Dentistry Leadership Development Program, exclusively for new grads and newcomers to the dental field. Whether you choose our 90-day guided course with bi-weekly coaching through the Teach Leadership model, or the on-demand version to go at your own pace, you'll get access at a significantly reduced price. 2025 grads or new hires get 50% off. 2024, 40% off. 2023, 30%. And it's not just for dentists. This offer is open to hygienists and any new dental team member who started in the last 3 years. If this sounds like something you are interested in, head to leadingindentistry.com/new to learn more. That's leadingindentistry.com/new to learn more. The second tip that I would focus on is closing the loop. So closing the loop just means if you say you're going to do something, come back around and actually do that thing. Or if someone has a question for you, then you want to be able to tell them, okay, I can't address this right now, but I'm going to address it. Can I get back to you in a week? And then actually following up with that. So when I had this feedback conversation with the staff member, something that I think did go well is I recognized through that conversation that it had kind of gone off the rails from where I wanted it to go. It didn't really accomplish my goals for that conversation. But I also recognized that it caught the other team member off guard. And as leaders, when we're going into one of these conversations, when we're trying to correct a behavior, or it's an accountability chat where we need to figure out that, or we need to help them figure out that there's things that need to be done differently, we've been preparing for that conversation. We know what we want to say. We've probably been bottling it up for a while. But when you sit down with someone else, this is the first time they're hearing about it. This is the first time that it's being sprung on them, and they don't really know how to respond. And so I was able to, as part of my beginning part of the conversation, or when I started to recognize that things weren't going the way that I had intended, I knew that there was going to be a follow-up conversation. And I let the team member know, hey, I know this is the first time that you're hearing about this because we have already thought about this and we came into this conversation knowing what we wanted to say. But I would love for you to think about the things we talked about today, and let's get back together on Thursday or whenever. Let's set a time so that we can get back together. And by that time, you will have had enough time to think about it, ask any questions you want to, that kind of thing. And so in this case, not only was closing the loop important, but also opening the loop, letting them know that this is not the last conversation we'll have about this. And not in a bad way. I know people just want to get out of that conversation and let it be the end of it. But letting them know that this isn't just a one-sided thing. I'm going to give you a chance to respond. I'm going to give you a chance to really think about these things and figure out what you'd like to say about it. And so giving them that opportunity. But also closing the loop. I think, you've heard the quote before that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you close the loop on something that someone's asking you about, or if someone just needs some information, you're able to show them that you care. You're able to show them that, hey, that question that you asked me meant enough to me, or our relationship meant enough to me that I went and followed up with that. I went and did some digging, and here's what I found. being able to get back to people and letting them know that you found some answers, or that you're at least in the progress of finding some answers. Sometimes I'll tell people, I don't have any real information for you, but I want you to know I'm working on this. This is what I've done so far to address it. And this isn't just important as a leader. It's definitely an important skill to have as a team member too. If someone asks you to do something, hey, I need you to go restock the gloves, but you haven't been able to get to it because you've been seating all the patients and helping things in the back, at least letting the person know who's asking you to do that thing, hey, I know that you asked me about this. I want you to know I haven't forgot, but this is what I'm working on, and I'll get to you by X, Y, or Z date. That helps just keep the line of communication open. So for this particular conversation that I had that I wish would have gone better, I was able to help close the loop a few days later, and I think that was really important. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up that I learned from this experience and from the deep study I did after was to never win an argument. Now, this comes from Jefferson Fisher. If you might have seen his stuff on Instagram. He's this lawyer that sits in his car, and he does a lot more than that. But for the purposes of his Instagram, he sits in his car and he just shares some communication tips. And his Instagram blew up to the point that he was asked to write a book about communication tips and his communication style. And his entire life is dealing with people who are in conflict. And he realized early on that you didn't ever want to win an argument, because when you win an argument, you lose the relationship. And when we are having these conversations with people, even if it's an accountability discussion or a time when we have to correct some behavior, the intention is never to win. The intention is to get all the information out onto the table, everyone's side of the story, so that you can figure out what the best course of action is moving forward. But if you're focusing on winning the argument, you're going to damage things that really matter. And if you are, there's this thing that I say where, people always get into arguments and then you feel like you want to be the adult in the conversation. But oftentimes when we're trying to be the adult in the conversation, we act like children too. And if we are saying that we're the adult in the conversation, if we're the bigger person, you got to be the bigger person and not try to win the argument, but instead help to reach some conclusion. I joke about this with my wife that I know people say, we never fight. And I'm not saying that I'm like that with my wife. We definitely have things that we have to work through from time to time. But the joke that I say is, we never have a fight. We just have a delayed understanding. And if you go into some sort of interpersonal conflict with the mindset that, this is just a delayed understanding. We're going to get in there. We're going to talk about it. We're going to figure out what the other side feels, how the other side feels, and how they're thinking. And then at the end of this, we're going to understand each other. If you go into those conversations with the idea that on the other side, you're going to be on the same page, that is what we're looking for. That is getting away from the mindset of winning the argument, of trying to come out on top. The most important thing is that on the other side of that conversation, you're on the same page. And again, sometimes that involves opening the loop so that you can close it in the future, setting a time to let them marinate with the information before you actually get on the same page, but at least to be on the same page as to what you're trying to accomplish as a team. And sometimes those conversations lead to not being on the same page, and that says a lot. But if you go in as the bigger person, acting like the, quote, adult in the conversation, and your entire intention is to get on the same page with the other person, you're going to be more collaborative than you will be combative. And that, at the end of the day, is the goal. So, just using our labeling and sorting tools, if I were to give you 3 tips of things that I learned after my deep dive into interpersonal communication, the 3 things are: first, focus on labeling and sorting. Second, close the loop. And third, never win an argument. All of those things for me were huge takeaways, and they seem like simple things, but I think appropriately applied, they will improve anyone's interpersonal communication skills, not just within an individual conversation, but how you communicate with people in general and how you approach conflict in your life. So with that, always be leading and always be learning. We'll see you next time. And that's it for this episode of the Leading in Dentistry podcast. If you learned something today, please leave a 5-star review and share the episode with a friend. If you're ready to take the next step for yourself or provide leadership training for a team member, visit leadingindentistry.com to check out our online courses and one-on-one coaching.